In this video, we're going to do the gauge swatch for the convertible and learn how to do the slip stitch crochet technique. Okay, I'm going to start out with a slip knot. My way of doing a slip knot is I go behind the thread and then I twist it all the way around and then I pull it through. And when I do a slip knot, I use that as my first chain. Now if you do a slip knot in a different manner and you pull it tight, no big deal. Just don't count your slip knot as a stitch. Okay, I am using medium worsted weight yarn and I'm doing the 10mm hook. My 10mm says it's an N. So we're going to do a gauge swatch to see if this is the right size hook. Okay, if you look at your pattern, most patterns have a gauge. This one here is gauge. It's 10 stitches, 17 rows, is 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Always take the time to check your gauge. And that is true because I've had my share of non-gauged disasters. You put a lot of time and energy into making something and then it's not usable because it's the wrong size. So since it says 10 stitches, we want to do a little more than 10 stitches. So I'll make a chain of 15. One is this one, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, now the technique is written out on the website's instructions too. And if you look under special stitches, the slip stitch and back loop only, and it's abbreviated SLB, and it tells you exactly how to make the stitch. And what you do is you insert the hook into the back loop, yarn over and loosely pull through both loops in one smooth motion. Okay, so I pulled it up, so that's not what they want you to do. You insert the hook and pull it through both loops. The first row is hardest to do because you have to have something to hold on to. You go under one loop, yarn over, pull it through, insert the hook, pull it through, just like so. So it's hard for me to do slow because if I go slow, I stop and do this, and then I go like that. Now that works, but it'll go much faster if you do it in one smooth motion. I also discovered while doing this, it's easier to work vertically. Hold your work this way and go in and pull it through. And then you hold it the previous stitch you did and go through both. And this first one is the hardest to get in because, like I said, you need to have something to hold on to. So what I do, I put the hook in and then I hold this chain and this all together in my left hand. Then I pull it through, just like that. And then I go up, go to the next one, hold it down here, pull it through. And so it's going fairly smoothly for me. And this is another one of those things. It's going to take practice to master the technique. But you always have to work loosely. Don't ever make it tight or it's not going to be stretchy. So you want to either count your stitches or mark the rows. Okay, but for this for a gauge swatch, I'm just going to count the stitches. So I'm going to chain 1 and turn. Okay. Now this is the tricky part. You want to find the back loop only. Now normally you work across this way, make it easier to find that back loop. Turn it back away the way you just finished. Okay. Hold your work this way. And then go under the stitch below, yarn over, draw through both of them. Okay, now you're going to flip this upwards because you're going to want to climb up the row of stitches instead of going across and holding it this way and twisting it around. For me, it's easier to hold it vertically and then go in the back loop of the slip stitch and pull it through. Another great thing about making a gauge swatch is you're practicing, you're getting the technique down, and you move it around and figure out the way it's the most comfortable for you to hold the work, to work into it. And that takes practice too. So like I said, I like to go in vertically. So I'm going bottom to top. Except for that first one, I turn it around the other way. I'll show you what I mean when I get to the other end. Now there I split my yarn. You just make sure you take your hook out and you fix that. Just like that. Another thing I love about this technique, the drape of the fabric is so soft and lovely. It really is. Okay, now I went all the way across. You can already see a rib forming. It's like a bump here and it goes down. Then you chain 1 and turn. Okay. Before I turn it around, I go into this first one. You skip the chain stitch. You just made that chain 1 and go into the back loop. See, I have it holding it this way for the first stitch, and then I flip it upright like this and then go back up. Okay, so what you should do, you want to go for more than 17 rows, so probably about 20. And you continue this technique. It looks like I got one of my stitches kind of tight. When you're actually making the garment, you want to make sure that you don't get any of them tight like that. It shouldn't be really hard to get your hook in. If it's hard to get your hook in there, then you're making your stitches too tight and you want to loosen up your tension a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to continue doing this until I have about 20 rows done, and then I will be back. So you can pause the video here, finish your 17 rows, and then resume the video, and I will show you how to measure your swatch. So happy crocheting, happy slip stitching. See you soon. Bye. Okay, before I do all 20 rows, I'm just going to see if my width is correct. Because if my width isn't correct, then I know the rows aren't going to be correct. But what you need to do before you measure your gauge swatch, you want to kind of squish it up in your hands a little bit. Tug on the corners diagonally. Stretch it this way a little, stretch it this way a little. Okay, and then crinkle it up in your hands again. This is to just even out your stitches so that you don't have it stretched anyway, and then just kind of pat on it a little bit. Okay, then I'll go somewhere in the middle And on the third stitch in, I'm going to put a stitch marker. Then I'm going to count across 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then put the stitch marker in the 11th stitch. Okay, so now when we get our ruler out, we know we're going to measure between those stitches. So if you put your thumb there and there, that's the width, and that needs to be 4 inches or 10 centimeters if you do metric. So I'll take out my gauge ruler, and I'm not counting the stitch that the marker's in. So right there where the edge is, line it up, and you know what? Mine's only 3 inches. So the 10 millimeter hook is too small. So what I'm going to have to do is put that aside and get out the next size bigger hook, which is the P, which it says in the pattern a P hook. The millimeters they have on there says 10, and a P is 11.5. So I'm going to tear this gauge swatch out, and I am going to do a new one with the P hook. And this does seem very time consuming, but you know, if I did this whole project with the smaller hook, I'd end up with a child's hat or something too small to use. So I'm going to frog all this out and start my gauge swatch over again. And hopefully you won't need to, because I've already done this. But you should still check your own gauge, because your tension might be different than mine. Your yarn might be slightly heavier or thinner or loftier than my yarn. So you should do this gauge swatch every time you make this hat, unless you're using exactly the same hook and yarn. So I'm going to tear this out. I'm going to start over. And when I finish the gauge swatch, I will come back and I will show you how I measured it again. So stick with me here, and this is a crochet along, that's why I'm showing you everything I'm doing. So I'll see you in a few minutes for the next video, gauge swatch part B.